Hi there and welcome to another application video for 5-Star Finishes Concrete Look Medium. This is being installed at the Spaces at 410 West Georgia. We did level 3 last year. This is for level 5 that will be opening up in a few weeks here. You can see Raman here, he's using a commercial roller sleeve, so if you have a large amount of space you can use a larger roller sleeve rather than just your standard painting sleeve that you'll find at Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore. That there is a 10mm roller sleeve microfiber. Microfiber tends to lay the quartz in the primer on a little bit heavier with a little bit more texture, so it really grabs the plaster for you compared to using a tight knit weave with something that's kind of a non-shed. There you can see the beautiful texture that the wall has. As that dries and sets up, it will kind of feel like a rough sandpaper, maybe like 120 grit sandpaper. And all those little micro crevices and everything will allow that plaster to easily take up onto the wall and also have something to dry into. This is a commercial space. There's a lot of open commercial ceilings there, so we sprayed the ceilings. We actually painted most of this off the space as well. And the ceilings you want to spray down to a certain height, so you're not trying to plaster around all of the different pipes and everything. And then you want to mask off with a laser level to whatever height. In this case, we matched the height to those drop ceilings that you can see in this image. And then we were just showing the masking tape on the floor as well. And we had to cut a lot of extra glue and epoxy and stuff back from the floor where the drywall met the concrete. And then we also had to make our own repairs and fill the gap to the bottom there so that we had a nice seamless finish for the drywall matching up to the nice polished concrete slab there. Here you can see the texture of the wall. It's all dry and ready to accept the concrete look plaster. The primer itself is see-through a little bit. It's not kind of chock full of marble powders or titanium dioxides because we don't need those. We just need the quartz primer, and we need the polymers that we have that are very specific that bind the plaster to your wall. So although you might be able to see through the quartz primer, it doesn't mean that what's behind there is going to flash through the plaster. Here we're starting to apply the first coat of the concrete look medium. The medium is kind of the middle ground between the fine and the coarse, and that means that there's a kind of a half-half ratio of sand grains to marble powder grains. So the coarse has a lot more sand, the fine has a lot more marble powder. This product here is kind of the mid-ground. It's quite easy to apply and work with and has a nice body to it because of that mixture of marble powder, the sand grains. The sand grains will kind of keep the marble powder off the wall a little bit, and you can set the thickness quite easily by just going grain size with this particular product. Kevin's applying the product with the Bianca Flex base coat trowel that's kind of new to the market. It doesn't create any dark marks, and it's a little bit larger, and we're finding for people who even aren't very skilled, the Bianca Flex trowel makes getting a very smooth first coat a lot easier. You get a lot less lines than using the traditional flexible base coat trowel that we offer. This particular trowel is quite expensive, like very expensive, and quite unnecessary for most people who are purchasing through our shop. So we're not offering it at the moment. We still recommend most people just use the base coat trowel. But keep in mind, this is not the flexible base coat trowel that we sell on the store here. It is a different trowel. Kevin's just applying the product in nice, smooth motions. It's very easy if you just place the product from the hawk onto the trowel and then make a nice upward motion as you see here. You don't want to leave those kind of straight, rigid lines in your base coat, so you'll see him start to come across sideways as well, to create an even finish where the lines aren't just all going in one direction, and also to remove any lines that are there as well as the product starts to smooth down and set up on them. He's being very meticulous here as he's on camera and we're trying to show a nice product, but you don't have to
go as slow as he was there and meticulously. Depending on the finish, sometimes you'd want to leave your first coat a little bit more rough. Leaving the first coat more rough will allow some more texture and lines to show through as you polish the second coat of the concrete look medium. This particular wall's been all coated out and is almost finished up. You can see it's got minimal texture, minimal lines. There'll be a few sand grains showing, a few chatter marks from, some of the sand grains are a little bit different mesh sizes. But you want a pretty kind of smooth, cohesive wall. You don't want to scrape it onto the wall, and you don't want to have too much plaster on the wall. I would say, less than a millimeter for this particular product. That little bit of lightening there, that's where they started, so you can see it starting to dry. It will start to lighten up quite quickly in areas where there's a higher amount of airflow. Here's another large wall that we're installing, and Kevin, around door frames and anywhere where there's a joint, especially the floor as well, you can just use your finger and work the product into those joints in order to get a nice seamless finish there and make sure that you don't have any white showing when you take your tape off. You also want to make sure for all those areas that you're taping back about a millimeter, so that when you do pull the tape, you're not having white gaps where you've kind of taped onto the wall. You always want to allow the product to come over onto your baseboards and moldings just a little bit, including your floor. For smaller sections like that, in this particular case, you're able to use the 6-inch quite effectively, but it would be even easier and faster if you had in your back pocket, say a 2 or I guess for that space, I would use like a 3-inch putty knife. So we always have a 1-inch, 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch putty knives, as well as the 6-inch flex knife that we use there, and we sell those on the shop as well, the Pavon putty knives. They're very handy because you always need various different sizes for all circumstances. When you're installing, you always run into weird little areas that require a small putty knife. This is what you can expect from your first coat. If it's done properly and has the right thickness, it will start to dry, you'll have a cloudiness to it, and eventually it will all kind of be one color. It's not going to look super impressive or like much on the first coat. It won't have a lot of color movement. It won't have kind of much of a concrete look to it. You always require a second coat of lime plasters or concrete look plasters. And that second coat, as it dries into the first, allows for all of the different color variations and the different modelings to appear, and allows you to also build your textures or to polish the particular product. You can't do much with the first coat. It will just kind of look like a kind of a fluffy, sandy, concretely, coat on the wall until it dries and you get that second coat on there and start to actually work the product up. Again, Kevin's going with the long, easy strokes. I really like this particular way of applying. Even if I'm at the middle of a wall, I'll start, at my hip and come up to my head and load the trowel up and do a full sweep up. There's also the half moon movements that you can use for smaller areas. You can see Ramen here just kind of trying to get a little extra product and finish off this little part here, which is the little half moon movement. So you put it on and then you take it off. You put it on and you take it off in a little half moon shape. That's a very good way of doing kind of tighter finishes, as well as some more traditional Venetian plaster finishes. When you're doing large spaces, you want to get as much product on the wall as you can, as quickly as you can, especially if you have thousands of square feet of this to do. And certainly the best option is to load up the hawk and the trowel and do more of an upward motion, so you're not dropping any of the product. And then once it's on the wall, you then come across sideways and in half moon movements to create more of a natural pattern and some more natural joint lines. And also, if you're having little lines in your product, you don't want them to all be straight. You want it to all be very natural and looking like the real thing. So here we're starting to move on to the second coat now of the decorative concrete look plaster medium. You can see the first coat's all set up. I make this mistake sometimes. I mean, it's not really a mistake, but when you make a lot of samples, like samples are not always given the proper dry time. And I've definitely noticed that, especially the concrete look plasters, they really do need an overnight cure before you do your second coat. Else, with all of the hydration and water going onto that base coat, if it's not fully set up, you can, when you're burnishing, end up with it kind of tearing off the wall a little bit, because it will kind of dissolve the concrete before it's really set up. So it's not an issue if you do it right. I've never had an issue with any walls, but with samples, if you're just trying to overcoat it like an hour later, sometimes portions of it just aren't set up enough. So don't try to rush these projects. Always, allow the primer to fully dry. The primer only takes like an hour to dry, maybe max. You'll never have an issue with that. As long as it's dry to the touch, it's gonna definitely adhere to the wall properly and accept the plaster. The first coat, put the first coat of plaster on, let it dry overnight, come back, do your second coat. Don't try to do both coats with cementitious products in the same day. Here you can see again, they're working from two different sides. If you have two people, you just start one person on one side, one person on the other. And you want to work in these clouds and kind of joint the product together. You never want to have straight boxes or lines, or like a straight line where you're going up and down right across the wall. These things will tend to show up in your final finish. So you always want to join it together, have multiple people working on it if you have, a crew. And always make sure that those lines are cloudy and random. As you can see here, we have these clouds that we're filling in. Now with the second coat, this is very specific to how I like to do things, but for a lot of my products, and especially any products that have sand, my In Tonakino series, as well as the Concrete Look series, they benefit greatly by applying them not tight, but with a little extra. So instead of applying it at grain size, maybe do like 1.5 mil on the second coat for the Concrete Look medium. We don't worry about lines. We don't worry about, you don't want to put too much on, but the idea is to lay off the whole wall as quickly as you can with excess. And then I come back with these Mape sponges. It's a very dense tiling sponge. And we do this for a lot of different things. And you want to sponge over the whole wall then and take any of that excess off as it starts to set up and work it all together so you don't have joint lines. This is very, very important, because if you go on Instagram or Pinterest and you look at a lot of people, even very professional people's installs, they have joint lines everywhere in their marmarinos and in their concrete look plasters because they don't use the specific technique. This is something I really developed because as an installer before I had crews, when I had to do big walls myself, you'd have a lot of joint lines and you just can't do it all yourself that quickly without help. So to get around it, I started laying off walls very fluffy with a lot of extra products so that I didn't have joint lines, and then I'd come back and either trowel the excess off if it was a really tight trowel coat, or start to sponge it all and bring it together and then burnish it after. So that's why you're seeing us sponging these walls. So it's a little bit like how they do acrylic stucco, where they just kind of chuck it up there and then start to float it all out. The only difference is that you could leave this a sandy, cloudy finish here, which we do as well, and then place the sealer over it. But after the sponging here in circular motions, we're going to let it set up even more and then burnish it with the Come Bianca trowel. You don't want to use a regular Pavon trowel or Come trowel or other, Marmarino Tools trowel, because it's going to darken very quickly and leave a lot of black marks all over the beautiful concrete. The sand is going to pull a lot of darkness out of the trowel. If you use the Bianca trowel, you'll be able to polish this very nicely without getting, any dark marks. You'll still get a little bit. Even the Bianca trowel, I find, none of them are perfect at having no dark marks whatsoever. But you can get a very nice burnish on the wall and maintain most of the aesthetics, that you want.
As you can see, we spend quite a bit of time sponging. It's not something where you just spend a second on it. We want to go over the wall 2 or 3 times with the sponge, making sure it's really well brought together before we start that burnishing process. There's about equal amount of time, I'd say, spent between the fluffy first, application coat of that second layer. Then you'd spend the same amount of time sponging over it 2 or 3 times, and then you'll spend the same amount of time again doing the final burnish. It sounds like it takes a lot, but ultimately this is quite a bit faster than doing it any other way, I find. All the walls that you see here, I just had a crew of my 2 guys here plus myself, and I did a lot of videoing, and I think the whole process took less than 4 days start to finish, and then they maybe spent 2 days doing the laser leveling and prep, so maybe like 6 days to do it all start to finish with the sealer as well. So this is the second coat. You can see it's sponged and it's started to shine up now. So that's been burnished maybe once so far. And then we'll come across and do another burnish on top of it as well. I think each wall we probably burnish 3 times. The shine really only starts to come up once the product is set to a certain point. It has to be firm enough and dry enough to receive that final polish and really start to shine up. If it has too much water in the product, it's just going to refuse to start to crystallize and produce that shine that you want. You also get a lot of these beautiful lines, markings, different modelings, chatter marks, all these different finishes that are very indicative of a concrete product. You can see here it's got small little pits, small little imperfections. We're not trying to put any extra texture into it. It's just exactly how the product comes out based on its formulation, aggregate size, and from the sponging. You can see my burnishing technique there. That's my, I was just doing a quick little burnish. So here we're doing half moons. Ramen really likes that technique. You can do a little bit more up and down, or there's a few other different burnishing techniques that you'll see in our other videos as well. It's really about feeling the wall, feeling how much drag it has, and just feeling kind of what it needs. You don't put the same amount of pressure everywhere as well. Some places might need less, some places might be a little bit stickier and dragging. You don't want to kind of tear the product by forcing it too hard with the trowel. So it's almost like you're caressing the wall with the trowel and feeling what it needs. And that just comes with experience of being able to just go over that wall and find with the trowel every section that's a little wet and maybe needs to get smoothed down a little bit, or if there's a section that even has too much plaster, you can kind of change the angle and just scrape a little bit of plaster off so it dries quicker. And then you can find those areas that are quite dry and really put a little bit more pressure on them and start to get some shine. So you have to shine the wall differently in each place, because each part is also drying more quickly. So here you're starting to see how the product is modeled and coming together after the sponge, and then the burnishing brings out all of that color. So as you're compressing the cement and the marble powder and the sands together, they're going to create different micro layers, and as that burnish and crystallization happens and shine, you're going to get all these different layers of color. And also, the longer that the product stays wet in certain areas, the hydration rate increases, and the product will actually take on lighter shades in those areas and go quite a bit darker where it dries much quicker. So if your base coat's a little thicker in areas, those particular parts are going to dry quicker and also go darker. So that's why the product creates all of these different lights and darks. And then all the top parts where the trowel is really hitting, as those get compressed, they get more translucent and dark as well, as you can see. So the burnishing is what creates that. If you just sponged it, it wouldn't look like that. You would just have the light and dark clouds, but you wouldn't have all of that beautiful texture and compression and shine from the side. So these are what the walls look like after they're burnished and polished, and they have not received their sealer coat yet. We'll show the sealer in a moment. You can see them, how they've dried there. They have this beautiful kind of lighter and darker sections that look very much like concrete that's kind of been set against boards. Here are the large walls. The boards are just finishing up the sponging for it here. Again, with those walls being so large, all three of us were working on that wall. We would all start together on one end, because you don't want people starting in different sections because they're going to dry too quickly. So you want to have everyone working very close together and laying the plaster on a little bit thicker than usual and as quickly as you can without worrying about what it looks like. Don't worry about taking lines out or anything like that. If there's quite a few lines, just swipe over it once just to kind of get rid of anything that looks linear or looks like it's going to be an issue to sponge out later. But for the most part, just kind of chuck it on the wall, smooth it down once, leave it a little thicker, and get it on as quick as you can. Then everyone gets on the sponges and starts to sponge that wall out again as quickly as they can to bring it all together, get rid of the lines, get rid of all the little joint marks, imperfections anywhere where it did dry in as a joint line, blend that together really well. And then you're going to end up with this kind of sandy, open grain texture. Then we get the trowels out, the Bianca trowels, and you start to, again, you don't have to be super quick with this because it's not going to be setting up that quickly if it's a little bit thicker, but you do want to get an initial burnish on that wall and go across it as quickly as possible just to kind of pull it together and create a little bit of a closed grain finish. This looks like about the second burnish now. You can see there's quite a bit of color and movement and modeling. The more that you work this product, the more movement and modeling that you can get, the more lights and darks that you can create, and also the more shine that you can have as well. And you could do a wax finish on this, or use a penetrating sealer and then buff and polish the wall as well. In this particular case, they wanted a topical sealer with a semi-gloss kind of shine, so we used our Polyseal Low Sheen Sealer. Keep in mind, these walls just looked like regular drywall and now they look like big sheets of concrete. And I just saw this project and it was all finished and I forgot to get photos for this video, but it looked just stunning. That's the view as you're walking down that hall. You're gonna have, 100 feet of these beautiful concrete walls there to admire. If you really wanted to work on this, you could do a lot more burnishing and then put a wax on it and then polish it up so it'd be like a waxed concrete and a high polish. So this is the next day. We've lit that cure. You don't want to remove the tape here if you're doing your polyseal, especially since you have a line at the top, because if you cut in vertically or do a microfiber roller along that top and don't have tape there, then you could take the tape off and retape it. But say you were just thinking to cut it in, you'd kind of have a line right across your whole wall there. So in this particular case, because you're looking down the wall, you want an even shine. So it's easier to just cut in a very small amount on the bottom and then not cut the top in and just roll top to bottom that Polyseal. Now this first coat is Polyseal Low Sheen and it's diluted 50-50, so there's 50% Polyseal and 50% water. If you just put the straight Polyseal on here, it would go white and it would be very thick and not look proper, and it might even go on too heavy and get a little cloudy on you because the product's kind of absorbing so much moisture. So you always want to do like a pre-seal with a 50% dilution of the Polyseal. That's going to go into the product
and really kind of seal up the pores so that the second layer of polyseal just glides right over the surface and isn't turning white, and creating a really beautiful second layer for you. You can see how it's drying here. It's got a lot of vertical lines. You don't have to worry about that. This is a non-color enhancing product as well, and it will continue to dry and clear up on you. Here you're seeing the last final roller coat here. Again, we're using 10 mil microfiber sleeves, especially for the 50/50. We've tried the 10 mil kind of non-shed matte, but with it absorbing so much into the actual plaster, a lot of the polyseal just kind of dries and mats up into the sleeve itself. It just doesn't go into the product properly. So you want to use a kind of a more open microfiber. Here, the second coat's being applied with a microfiber 10 mil sleeve as well, and you can see it just rolls on like glass. Like it's not absorbing much into the product anymore, and it's very easy to get a nice even shine. You're also not seeing it wet out nearly as much as you did on the first coat. This is similar to how we seal our micro cement, where we do 4 layers of this and just kind of continue to seal up the product more and more until we do our oil sealer. You can see it creates a lot more. It's not color enhancing, but it does kind of visually provide more depth to the product, although not really darkening it. The polyseal is a very special product because it stops any other polyurethanes or other products from darkening. A lot of polyurethanes, even if they're water-based, they really do a lot of color enhancement and will kind of darken your product and ruin the finish that you've created. And a lot of polyurethanes don't like to stick to plasters or cement-based products on their own. They need a primer. So the polyseal has specific binders in it that make it very special, so it will stick and never kind of come off of any of these plasters. And at a 50/50, it's going to go directly into the matrix and harden and strengthen as well, and bind right to the inner matrix of the cement. And then if you wanted to put a polyurethane coating over top of it, then it would really adhere to it nicely. With this, we're just doing a second coat of the polyseal, but again, you're not getting that issue of having color enhancement, so you can create a nice finished, very durable product without color enhancement and keeping that natural cloudiness and modeling. It's not super difficult. You don't want to be putting a lot on and having drips and roller marks. You just want to carefully load the roller sleeve and just roll up and down, creating a nice even layer. It doesn't have a lot of body to it, the polyseal, so you're not kind of rolling a thick coating on, just whatever the product is willing to receive. You don't need to have more or less. This will have a nice final kind of low to semi-gloss sheen. Some parts will be a little shinier than others. Some parts are going to be matte. It also depends how much areas were burnished as well and how the final coating will take. The polyseal does leave the product looking quite natural. Again, we don't want a really thick coating of plastic over the particular product. This is just to kind of enhance the shine, durability, and also provide a good kind of washability to the walls without having a really plastic coating on top of them. We also like to use paint strainers as well. Sometimes the polyseal can have a few little, dags in it, a few little dried bits of plastic or whatever, where the sealer is kind of, sedimented to the bottom. So if you want to be ultra professional, you can actually strain the polyseal as well before you apply it, just to make sure you don't have any little aggregates or anything in there whatsoever. You can see on the second coat too, it sits on the surface more because it's not absorbing in as much. And just because it's sitting on the surface, it's going to provide more durability and also just be a little bit shinier as well than the first coat that was diluted, as that's acting more as like a penetrating sealer. This is going to sit on that surface more and provide that nice kind of low sheen, semi-gloss, satiny kind of look here that really looks like a polished concrete on the walls. But you can see too, there's portions that are still matte so that you're not having a full plastic coating on the walls. It still looks very natural with the polyseal, and that's why I really like that particular product. Here's some photos of the finished walls. You can see all the beautiful modeling, the color variations. And this product is great for use exteriors, interiors, ceilings, feature walls, fireplaces, hood ranges. Has many different applications. You can also use it for hearths. And we do recommend for a lot of those applications to stick with the polyseal, as it's a really good versatile sealer.